Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of December of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, geolocations, so let's start. And first we're going to talk a little bit about Kiev, because Zelensky continues showing his wife, and there were rumors and talks that Zelensky, if he is ever going to leave the president chair, will try to replace himself with his wife. And more we can see his wife interviewed by different Western sources with Western media, and for example BBC asked her a few questions and she told us that Ukrainians will be left to die. The country faces mortal danger if the West stops financial assistance. The West has already stopped financial assistance, and of course this is a big problem, and so that's why the Ukrainians took a decision to replace the Western assistance with bodies, with soldiers, with people, with Ukrainians. And for example, on these scenes we can see another day of mobilization in Ukraine. Significant number of police officers, military forces there, as you can see, have blocked the entrance, the exit from this territory, and basically they entered some hotel or place, a casino where people can relax and enjoy their holidays and so on. And after that they probably managed to capture a significant number of people. They captured a lot of men, and basically they sent them to become the challengers or leopards, tank drivers or something like this. Anyway, this is the democracy, and if you remember, and now as you know, people all over the internet, you can find a video how Zelensky tells us that Ukraine is not Russia, where the Russians try to force people to fight, and Ukraine is the country where people choose by themselves. It's their own choice to fight for Ukraine. Now let's move further to Sumy and Bryansk area, to Sumy region, Chernihiv area, Bryansk area from Russian side, and Kursk as well. We also got lots of details, lots of updates from this territory. According to information we have, the Sumy local authorities have announced about evacuation. 18 villages have been fully evacuated in Sumy region. I have the list. Tomorrow before the next video I will update the map, and we will discuss the evacuated villages, and we will understand the possible Russian attack or plans of the Russians and the Ukrainians in this area. Furthermore, other sources are saying that Ukrainians continue building fortifications in this area. As you can see, a very strong one, and the question is why the Ukrainians are building fortifications, and we also got probably an answer to this question today. Some sources are saying that this is the concentration of Russian forces somewhere on the border of Sumy and Chernihiv area. As you can see, significant number of armored vehicles. I'm not sure that this video is real and this video is fresh. Some sources are saying that this is something like somewhere in Moscow before another parade, before another meeting, or before another holiday or something like this. Other sources are saying that this is a fresh video because there are no like markups like Z or V. So this is new tanks and new armored vehicles. I'm not sure whether this is real or fake update regarding the concentration of Russian forces in Sumy, but I know for sure that many sources are saying that the Russians do have some plans regarding these areas during the winter period of time. Now let's move a little bit closer to the ground, and first we're going to talk about another important video. On this scenes you can see how the Russians are making training and military exercises by attacking with FPV drones the Navy drones or something like so. This is just regular military exercises, but as I understand, the Russians faced lots of problems with Ukrainian Navy drones, lots of problems. So that's why they all those days, all the time, they were trying to find a solution, the cheapest and economy solution, how to prevent any problems from the Ukrainians in the future. And as I understand, they found a solution. This is a very cheap solution, obviously, to use the regular FPV drones against the Navy Navy drones, ships from the Ukrainian side, because first of all they are cheaper, and from the other side you can control them without problems, because sometimes the Ukrainians can't control the drones. They can send them and that's it. So we'll see. Now we're moving to the situation on the ground. First we're going to talk about Kherson direction. The Russians are saying that as a result of activity and clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 50 soldiers and 3 armored vehicles. As you can see, the main activity took place in Krynky, and very interesting picture we have from Kherson direction as well. Let's start from the picture. On this video we can see the next stage of improvements. This is the new tool that the Russians created to increase the defense of of their fortifications and trenches all over the combat line. As you know, just starting from the special military operation, and this is not just starting from the special military operation, we saw the situation in Syria as well. The Russians start creating new defense tool on the top of the tanks, like preventing the FPV drone strikes. And now the Russians took a decision to use the same practice, the same experience, and they took a decision to reinforce and to improve their defense in every single trenches right now. So now they're building the same tools as they have on tanks, but currently they're building them above the trenches. So this is the next step, how to increase defense of soldiers and manpower on the ground. Obviously, during the next year, if special military operation continues, the Russians will improve every single trenches they have and that they're under their control. Now let's move to Krynky. Now, as you can see, there are a lot of events. During the previous days, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians made few attempts to storm Krynky. First of all, let's increase the number of days from the 8th of December. And if you remember, yesterday we have already discussed the Russian attempt to attack Krynky with infantry. The Russians managed to establish their positions on the edge of the city. They were trying to find and discover the Ukrainian fire positions, sniper positions, artillery positions. Probably the Russians managed to do this, and after successful reconnaissance operation, the Russians withdraw their positions towards the forest. And today the Russians made another attempt to attack the village, but today they were attacking this territory with tanks. At least 2 tanks, and this is not like a real storm operation. Probably this is not a reconnaissance operation, not in combat but in force. The Russians were using 2 armored vehicles, probably 2 tanks or 1 tank on 1 armored personal carrier. Infantry, the Russians landed the infantry in this area, and then there was a very heavy clashes on this direction, but the Russians haven't managed to, let's say, to establish full control. They just also discovered Ukrainian positions and they withdraw their positions back to the mainland. And so later we got another video from the Ukrainian side of 1 destroyed or damaged Russian tank. Probably this is the tank that was damaged or destroyed during the previous video we just seen. So the Russians are more and more active in this area, and as we discussed, as I understand, the Russians took a decision to solve Krynky issue and to complete the story of Ukrainian foothold on the Russian bank of the river. During the day, the Russians were bombing this territory heavily, not just the village. Also, the Russians published few videos how they discovered the Ukrainian boats somewhere along the Kazachelagerska Konka River and Dnipro River, and as a result of FPV drone strikes, few more boats were destroyed. For example, the Russians are saying that during the previous week of clashes, they managed to destroy up to 21 boats. So this is like everyday basis process, and it's like a part of the process to destroy Ukrainian foothold in this area. Furthermore, the Russians were using FPV drones against the Ukrainian positions inside the village. As you can see on this footage, almost everything in this area was reduced to ruins, and of course the Russians were using FAB 500 to destroy the Ukrainian positions. So we can't jealous the Ukrainian forces who are located in this area. Obviously they know and they understand that for them it's better or to either to surrender or to move from this territory back on the Ukrainian bank of Dnipro River. From the Ukrainian side, they also published few videos because the Russians were trying to attack the Ukrainians not just using armored vehicles. As we discussed, they tried to attack with infantry from the forest, with armored vehicles along this, let's say, road from Kazachelagerye to Krynky, and the Ukrainians tried to counterattack the Russians. For example, on this video we see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the movements of the Russian infantry in the forest on the south of Krynky, and they attacked them with multi-launch rocket systems from the Ukrainian bank of the river. So the distance is very big first of all, but anyway, no matter the distance, I believe that the multi-launch rocket system that attacked the Russians was destroyed as a Lancet strike, probably. Now we're moving to Zaporizhzhia direction. We have few updates from this territory as well. The Russians are saying that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 35 soldiers, 2 armored vehicles and 2 artillery systems. On this video we see how the Russians discovered another Ukrainian artillery system, probably Mstab or D-30, and as a result of counter-artillery duels, that system was destroyed. So no changes on the ground during the day in comparison with the previous video. Now we are moving to South Donetsk direction. The same story, no changes on the ground, just counter-artillery duels, Lancet huntings. On this video we see that how the Russians managed to discover another Ukrainian artillery system hidden somewhere in the tree lines among the fields between Kurahovo and Uglidar. and as a result of Lancet strike, that system was destroyed. From just as a single video, there is nothing special in this video. It's just a regular routine, a regular video we see every day. To understand the global scope, we need at least to increase the number of days since the 1st of November. And this picture shows us the better understanding how many Ukrainian artillery systems and tanks and air defense systems were destroyed during the previous months. Significant number. The Russians have complete superiority in this area, and the Ukrainians do have problems with their support of their forces in the cities, villages like Novomikhailivka, Ugledar, and of course in the village Marinka, which the Russians were bombed and attacked with FPV drones heavily during the previous 24 hours. After the Russians established complete control over the southwestern part of Marinka, the Russians changed their focus towards the northwestern part of Marinka, and during the previous 24 hours they were attacking this territory. As you can see, the same picture, just the ruins, nothing more, and there are a lot of Ukrainian soldiers who are trying to hide among these ruins, and the Russians were hunting them during the previous day. Now we are moving to Avdiivka area, to Donetsk direction. According to the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes on this area, the Ukrainians lost 200 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. There are no changes on the ground on the northern direction. Nothing is happening right now. Just the Ukrainians published some geolocated videos that proves and confirms the Russian positions along this or that line. On this video we see another Ukrainian FPV drone strike during the snow period of time, which means that the video is very recent, and the strike and Russian positions were here. That was under Ukrainian drone attack. So the situation is very difficult in the northern part. We have some updates from the southern area, and the Russians, after a very small operational pause, renewed their offensive operation, and currently the Russians are heading to the north from industrial area, trying to cut the territory, the forest that located between industrial area in the village by the name of Kamyanka. So the next Russian goal, the next Russian target is this small part of the Avdiivka area that located also on the left from N20 road. The Russians were bombing the Ukrainian fortifications in this area during the day, which confirms the beginning of some artillery preparation. Later, after, or maybe the Russians have already launched FPV drone strikes and clearing, and after these two phases, the Russians will launch the ground operation on this territory as well. The Ukrainians published a very interesting video. If you remember, a few days ago, we were talking about the new Russian methods of supply and support of their forces on the edge positions using FPV drones, like ground drones like this one. The Russians on this video, as you can see, were sending some support, maybe cigarettes, maybe food, maybe some munition to the edge position, but the Ukrainians destroyed that drone with FPV drone strike. So this is the war. This is the new warfare, when not the soldiers are fighting, but the drones are fighting with each other, and the first level of fightings is the fighting for supply and support roads. Now we are moving to Donetsk itself. The Ukrainians published the video how they managed to discover the Russian fuel depot, and as a result of HIMARS probably strike or FPV drone strike, that fuel depot was destroyed. We see significant fire, which means the secondary detonation and so on. So this is another logistical area that the Russians were using to support their forces during offensive in Avdiivka. Now we are moving to the most important and the most interesting area, to Solidar direction, Bakhmut Solidar direction, where the Russians were advancing during the previous day. As you can see, significant number of icons, significant number of videos. So let's start discuss them one by one. First of all, we need to understand a few important things. The Ukrainian positions. The most important Ukrainian position is located, of course, in Bohdanivka itself, that the Russians are trying to storm, have been trying to storm since the beginning of this week, or probably the previous week. There is a hill that located on the north of Bohdanivka. There is a, let's say, main fortification area that located between Bohdanivka and Khromovo, and this is the Ukrainian base. This is the main Ukrainian foothold. This is the main Ukrainian base that they try to defend during the have been trying to defend during the previous week, and this is the line that the Russians have been trying to storm since the beginning of this week as well. And we have a lot of geolocations in the past, and we have some today. During the previous days, the Russians managed to improve their positions and to establish control over the edge positions, over the edge tree lines, and to get as close as possible to Bohdanivka itself. And during the most important achievement from the Russian side, as I understand, is that they managed to cut the main supply road that went from Grigorovka to Bogdanovka. Currently, this territory is under complete Russian control. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians tried to counterattack in direction of these three lines, so along this area, trying to cut the main Russian supply road. The thing is that if you take a look at this map, you're gonna see Berkhovka water reservoir, this one, and this water reservoir is located between two Russian polygons, let's call it like this. The first Russian polygon and concentration of the Russian forces is located between Dubovo, Vasilievka, Grigorovka and Bogdanovka. This is the main Russian concentration of forces that they use operational reserves to attack the northern hill and Bogdanovka itself. And the second Russian concentration of forces is located between Berkhovka, Yagidnaya and Khromova. So this is the next Russian, let's say, polygon of main forces. And from this territory, the Russians are trying to attack and develop their offensive operation from the south to Bogdanovka in direction of the main Ukrainian hill that located on the road 0506, and that's it. So the Ukrainians try to counterattack, trying to cut the main supply road, trying to cut the communications between Russian two polygons. It's very important because sometimes you need to be flexible and sometimes you need to redeploy some reserves from one position to another. But the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian movements in this area. As we can see, the Ukrainian storm squad was moving very silently from main Ukrainian positions of Bogdanovka in direction of the Russian positions, but they were discovered by the Russian reconnaissance team, and after that the Russians started bombing and attacking this territory heavily with 152mm shells. As I understand, the Ukrainians were defeated in this area. They had significant losses and they were forced to step back to Bogdanovka. After first wave of attack with 152mm shells, the Russians covered this territory with multi-launch rocket systems. After that, the Russians changed their focus further in direction of village itself, and they were bombing the edge positions of the village as well. So as you can see on the scenes, the usage of multi-launch rocket systems, and this is not just like a regular routine, this is the artillery preparation. Obviously, after such a heavy fire, the next step is to launch the ground operation. Maybe the Russians have already launched, and while I'm making this video, while you're watching this video, the Russians are fighting for the edge positions with the Ukrainians, or maybe the Ukrainians have already left, because everything is so fast, everything is real, and the situation can be changed even before I finish recording this video. So this is another wave of multi-launch rocket systems, bombardments of the village, and now from this perspective we can say that obviously Bogdanovka is the next Russian goal. Not Klishchevka, not Chasov Yar, not Ivanovskaya, not Andreevka, but Bogdanovka. This and Grigorovka, obviously after Bogdanovka. But when talking about this territory, there are a few problems that the Russians will face during their offensive operation. To understand, it's better to return back to the previous video. As you can see, according to this video, Bogdanovka itself is located in the lowland, and there is a hill that located on the north, let's say, if I'm talking about the picture, about the video scene, on the top right corner of this footage, there is a hill, as you can see. So that's why even if the Russians are able to enter Bogdanovka itself, let's say if the Russians are able to enter to the northwestern part and to start moving along the streets, they're going to be very difficult for the Russians to control the village, because they will be always under Ukrainian fire, and the Ukrainian fire that located on the hill on this area, so this one, they will be always under fire. I'm not saying that the Russians are not able to capture Bogdanovka. They can capture, they can dig in deeper, obviously, but it will cost them significant price. The Russians will be forced to pay significant price if they want to control Bogdanovka without taking control over the main hill that located on the north. So obviously the Russians, if they want to be successful, they need to attack on this front line using broad front line attack. And if we calculate the distance of the front, the approximate distance of the front the Russians need to attack, it's around 10 kilometers. So the Russians need to attack in a distance of 10 kilometers from the north in direction of the hill, in direction of Bogdanovka itself. The Russians need to develop their offensive operation along the railways and to the south in direction of the main hill. And if they can take every single fortification, then the entire Ukrainian foothold on the Russian bank of canal will collapse automatically. During the day, the Russians also were bombing this territory and attacking with Lancet strikes that we have already already discussed in the previous video. So the situation for the Ukrainians is critical in Bohdanivka, so let's see what is going to be next. Also, very interesting updates are coming from the Solidar direction, from this territory. The Russians launched, we've been discussing this territory since for the previous few days. The Russians are moving along the railways in direction of Avdiivka, and as we discussed, as a result of that attack, they managed to establish control with this territory, but for now we still haven't received a single geolocation. And the Russians are trying to attack Vysyola from two directions, from the east and from the west, and according to some sources they have already managed to half encircle the village, let's say to create something like this in this area, and now it's also about to start the ground operation in this area either. So we'll see, but for now no updates regarding any clashes inside of the village. Now we are moving to Lyman area. We got some updates. The most important are coming from Ukrainian Forest. The Russians are saying that as a result of clashes on Lyman area, the Ukrainians lost 155 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles. As you can see, the level of loss is still very heavy for Ukrainians, and that's why that means that there are very heavy clashes on this direction. And when talking about Kupyansk, the same story. According to the Ministry of Defense, the Ukrainians lost 105 soldiers in this area, and the Ukrainians lost 3 armored vehicles and 1 artillery system. So as you can see, the level of loss is also very heavy, but yet we haven't received any geolocations for the previous 24 hours that we can use to understand whether they're progress or not. So as you can see, the situation is getting worse and worse for the Ukrainians, and the worst thing is not the absence of the Western support, not the difficult situation with mobilization, not the situation that Ukrainians are losing the cities and the villages and footholds, strongholds step by step. The most difficult situation, critical situation, is that the Russians can open the second front line, and possibly they can attack in Chernihiv and Sumy direction, and this can bring complete collapse of Ukraine, complete. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.